can make it there. I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York.
How we doing, everyone? Happy Friday. It's the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. How about the New York Knicks? NBA Clutch Player of the Year, Jalen Brunson, coming up big in Detroit. Knicks get a huge win. Brunson's 40th point, a game-winning three after his teammate, his running mate, Karl Anthony Towns, fouled out. And while the Knicks have made many of their fans ever so frustrated with not being able for 2 consecutive years to close out games at the Mecca, Madison Square Garden. The flip side positive is that they are currently undefeated on the road in these playoffs. And whenever you're able to beat a team 3 times on their home floor, it's something to feel good about. Just a phenomenal basketball game yesterday on both sides. It really did have a little bit of everything. You know, I give the Detroit Pistons, a young team, a lot of credit for constantly fighting their way back into the game. Definitely not easy what the Pistons were able to do, which was shave a substantial lead going into the fourth quarter. But the Knicks are going to be meeting a familiar foe. It's a historic matchup, as in round two, they will be taking on the defending NBA champion Boston Celtics, a team that they have not been able to beat this year. Um, while I don't necessarily think it's going to be a sweep in Boston's favor and the Knicks can't compete, I think it's a very tall task. And I do expect the Celtics to ultimately win the series in 6, but I think it's a measuring stick for the Knicks moving forward to see where they are. This round one series is nothing to feel bad about or feel slighted that we didn't get out of it in 5 games. Whenever you win a series in the NBA, it's something to feel good about. This Knicks team is not far, no matter how you cut it. However, I still think that the ultimate trade that sent Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo over to Minnesota in exchange for Karl Anthony Towns did hurt the roster some this year. And I do think that the Knicks are still going to be in the market to look for a little more help on that second team. But a great feel-good win. And, you know, losing Isaiah Hartenstein, where the Knicks were kind of strapped in a position where the Thunder were able to offer more, I think that also hurt. But Knicks have time to feel good for a couple of days, and they'll be opening it up in Boston. A split through the first 2 games is imperative. And also playing better at Madison Square Garden is also going to be imperative. You know, Karl Anthony Towns and KP, Kristaps Porzingis meet in the playoffs. Definitely not the way many drew it up when these two players were in the same draft, as Towns was a Timberwolf and Porzingis was actually drafted by the Knicks. But keys to victory for the big upset is that the Knicks are going to have to find a way to not get destroyed in the paint, and they're going to have to hold their own on the glass. Goes without saying that the Knicks have to take better care of the basketball as well. But I do think it's going to be an entertaining series. Now, Cleveland, Indiana, round two, going to be good as well. I like the Cavaliers also in 6, but I think the Pacers are going to give them a decent run. Something that I find kind of interesting is Tyrese Halliburton's dad will not be allowed for the foreseeable future to go to Pacer home or away games after his antics and getting in the face of Giannis. I think that family members, girlfriends, wives, people that are on the extended crew of NBA teams or any sports team for that matter should never heckle opposing players. I think that's really crossing the line, and I think the Pacers are doing some damage control and doing what they need to do in a situation like that. Los Angeles Clippers getting a big dub over the Denver Nuggets yesterday. That is going to be an epic game 7. I'm still kind of leaning towards the Clippers to pull the upset. I think the Clippers are going to get the W there, but it's going to be a fun final game, which has undeniably been the best game of the first round, the best series, I should say, of the first round. Golden State Warriors tonight looking to close out the Houston Rockets. That will be a 7 defeating a 2, and I think it plays out that way. I like the Golden State Warriors to handle their business and get out of this round. And the West bracket's going to kind of be busted down to a level when you consider that the Los Angeles Lakers are already kicked out of the playoffs. Minnesota, Golden State, both looking like teams that have the ability to win this thing. And, with the way the brackets are set up in the NBA, it's not the highest remaining seed versus the lowest remaining seed. It's based off of a traditional bracket. So, very interesting stuff going on in the West. And this is not the first time. Last year, the bracket was kind of busted too with lower seeded teams. I did want to ask you, the viewers, this. LeBron James, has often in the past referred to himself as the GOAT. When you consider this is 2 decades in the league, of course, all time points leader. But when you stick around the NBA for as long as he has, you start accruing some stats that are not so favorable. Top in turnovers, missed shots, etc. Losses are becoming a big one now. And while I think LeBron has a special place in history and has definitely made a huge impact on the NBA because of his diversified skill set, I really think it's time to put this GOAT debate to rest. Because when you look at his guys in his era, whether it be Steph Curry, whether it be Tim Duncan, these are guys that were able to win multiple championships while he was in the league. You could also say that about Kobe Bryant. And where I take issue with this whole GOAT debate stuff is that if you go back to the Michael Jordan era prior to Phil Jackson taking over the Bulls, Tex Winter implementing the triangle offense, basically when he got a little help, and that help mainly I'm referring to Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen, of course, nobody was eating on Chicago's watch when they hit the pinnacle, with the exception of the Jordan retirement and coming back with only 17 games left in the 95 season. Nobody was hitting on the Bulls. Nobody was taking the Bulls out. It took the Knicks 7 games to defeat the Jordan-less Bulls, and Orlando's Penny and Shaq pulled off quite an impressive feat when they defeated the returning Michael Jordan, who during the series actually changed back to number 23. Ultimately, the Magic lost that year to the Houston Rockets, which culminated in their second championship. I think for NBA fans, one of the things we get cheated out of going back to that era is it would have been nice to see the Houston Rockets and the Chicago Bulls meet in the finals, because I believe both teams were the great unknown who would have won. And the most fair way that I could lay it out for anyone is if Michael Jordan would have played the 94 season, I'm going to say that the Bulls would have defeated the Rockets that year. But then you fast forward to 95, Horace Grant moved along to another team and actually beat the Bulls. Let's just say hypothetically, if the Bulls were able to get to the finals without Grant, I think that ultimately would have been the difference in the second matchup with Houston, because the Bulls did not have Dennis Rodman yet. So the most fair way to put it, I think the Rockets and Bulls would have split those two finals hypothetically if the Bulls made it. But 7 out of 8 still would have been impressive. 6 out of 8 still is. We talk GOAT debate, GOAT debate. LeBron has his place, no question. But I always have an admiration for guys who do more in a shorter time span. I think about a guy like a Magic Johnson who played 12 seasons. And if you want to include partially year 13 when he came back in 95 for a brief while, that's great. 5 championships in a 12-year span, left the NBA as the all-time assist leader, which is incredibly impressive. 9 championship appearances. I think prior to the ascension of Michael Jordan, most people would say that Magic Johnson was the greatest NBA player. He had a teammate that sometimes could stymie that vote of confidence that he is the GOAT because, of course, his main teammate was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, formerly Lou Alcindor, who came over from the Milwaukee Bucks. Jordan Patrick, the GOAT argument is layered discussion that will continue indefinitely. Yeah, no question about it. It's a short list, though. Yes, indeed, it's a short list. Yes, indeed, very short list. I'm gonna just throw my five at you right now, Jordan. No particular order. Actually, I'll give you the order. I got Michael Jordan at number one. I think 6 championships, 2 3-peats, and being the most proficient scorer in his era, and probably any basketball era. You talk about NBA Finals points per game average, second to only Rick Barry, but Rick Barry only made the finals once, whereas Jordan played in 6 different finals. The only other generational scorer that you could put ahead of Jordan, truthfully, would be Wilt Chamberlain. But yes, Jordan would be my number one. Number two could be debatable. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has 6 championship rings. He won with 2 different organizations. But I would give the nod to Magic Johnson as the number two overall in my top five because of the fact that I think he was the best player on the majority of those Lakers teams because prior to Magic being drafted out of Michigan State, they were not winning championships with Kareem. I think Magic was the straw that stirred the drink, so to speak. So Magic would be confidently my number two all time. I think you could have your pick with either Jabbar or Wilt Chamberlain. I think because of all the points that Chamberlain scored, he has to be in the conversation. I would put Jabbar at 3. I would put Chamberlain at 2. I wholeheartedly believe those are the 2 greatest centers of all time, narrowly jumping Shaq and Olajuwon. Now, Jokic, what he's doing is super special, and he will be in the conversation not just for all-time centers, but for all-time players. That leaves us for a fifth. Who would be number 5? If we're doing it on a positional value, it might be unpopular, but I think maybe, just maybe, Tim Duncan needs to be considered because I think he was the most outstanding power forward to ever play the game. Is it LeBron? Is LeBron number 5? From the statistical value, from his success in so many different places, some would feel comfortable putting LeBron there. I would not put Curry there, although I respect his game. I don't consider him the best at his position all time. I think you could make a logical argument that LeBron might be the greatest small forward of all time, though. So if I had to put LeBron anywhere, he would be at 5, but no higher than 5. And then I think you can really debate it out with some of the other greats. Bill Russell, the greatest winner, but not the greatest at his position. I think he would narrowly miss the top 10 or just make it on the back end. And of course, Larry Bird. I think Larry Bird gets sometimes overlooked and forgotten, but I believe that he should be in that small forward debate as well, next to LeBron James. I think because of the longevity, you would probably have to give it to LeBron. Kobe definitely makes my top 10. I think the reason why he might narrowly miss my top 5 is because when you revisit the Laker three-peat, he was the number 2 option to Shaquille O'Neal. Reason why he still makes my top 10 is because post Shaquille, he was able to win multiple championships with a revamped Laker roster. Yeah, I would have to say so, Jordan. I think that's fair. Jordan, let me ask you, who do you like in these round two series? Of course, they're not all completed and set up. We've got the Warriors and Rockets tonight. I think the Warriors will be advancing. But do you think the Knicks have a snowball's chance in hell to pull an upset against the Celtics, or do you think it's just going to be more of what we witnessed in the regular season? I definitely like Cleveland against Indy, but I think the true excitement in round two is actually going to be out west because of the fact that the Minnesota Timberwolves already moved on and the Golden State Warriors are about to move on. I think those two particular series are going to be a lot of fun. And I also think that whoever wins Los Angeles and Denver has the ability to knock off the Thunder. I really mean that. And out west, having the best record has not been the biggest thing because a lot of these teams have been prepping for health and just getting into the playoffs. So definitely a very interesting situation in the NBA playoffs, and I do think that the Minnesota Timberwolves have quietly proven that that trade with the Knicks might be a legit 50-50 because Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle have really fit in well. DiVincenzo being a nice bench piece, where Randle being a good supporting cast member, and I think it really works out well for Anthony Edwards. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement too, Jordan. They're the champions for a reason. If the Knicks are able to win two ball games in this series, I think they did a lot. Sadly, I think the Knicks, in terms of just lining up with the Celtics, were actually in a better position the last couple of years. This particular season, although it's been a very exciting year for the Knicks, I think that from a personnel standpoint, with losing Dante, losing Randall, acquiring Cat, I would still make that trade 10 out of 10 times. I just think the Knicks still need a little more bench depth to line up with the Celtics. And the sad part about that is that this particular year, the Knicks have been so good against the West. Yeah, OKC's probably the best run. Yeah, I agree with that too, Jordan. We're like minded this morning, very much so. Isaiah Hartenstein, I had mentioned it at the top of the show. I really think Isaiah Hartenstein was a huge, huge loss for the Knicks because while Carl Anthony Towns is a big man, he's not the kind of big man in terms of center value that the Knicks get. He hangs out a lot on the perimeter. Sometimes he does go missing in the offense. Yesterday was a good example. He ultimately fouled out. He still got his 15 boards. He still met the quota for a double double. But I still think, you take a guy like a Mitchell Robinson, defensively, he shows up a lot. Defensively, I think he's been huge, particularly in this series right now. But if you take it back to the injury he suffered in the Philly series last year with Joel Embiid, Mitch hasn't been the same. And, offensively, it's always an adventure, particularly if that guy's on the free throw line. All right, so Jordan, moving it along to baseball for a second. You're a big Rays fan. What are your thoughts on the Rays going into this new month of May? And are you happy where they currently sit? I personally think that you guys have done a pretty good job, all in all, given the off the field issues going back to the Wander Franco thing. You lose a superstar there. And it's the worst way to lose a superstar because you literally would get nothing for him. But I really do like what Kevin Cash has done with this roster. I think you get the most out of what you put on the field. So I'm going to give you a second to respond on that. But I am curious to see what you feel and how you feel about your Tampa Bay Rays, because truthfully, I think you guys have the ability to hang out in the American League East for the foreseeable future. Going into this particular season, I felt that the Red Sox were going to be much improved in the early going. That has been proven true. But yeah, let me know what you think on that. As my Yankees go, nothing new coming from me. Uh, I like our lineup. I like the way the team is constructed, but the Devin Williams acquisition will either make or break us. All right. Yeah, the Royals have been another team that's been kind of tough to completely figure out. And I think in part because some of their pitching heroes from last year haven't exactly performed at the same level. I mean, last year, Seth Lugo, you're talking Cy Young candidate. The Royals have, potentially in a different era of baseball, if you didn't have Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani as just such obvious offensive studs, I do think Bobby Witt Jr. would get a little more credit. But I also think it would be foolish for baseball fans to overlook how good Bobby Witt Jr. has been. But that's one of those divisions that I really believe, truthfully, anybody could win. The Guardians, the Royals, the Tigers all have a shot in that division. I see it to be very wide open, almost on the level of the American League West. Yeah, I tend to agree. And I also think the Yankees are a little aggravated that they lost two out of three to, in my opinion, a much worse Orioles team than they've been. I boldly predicted on our preview show for MLB that the Orioles were actually going to finish in last this year. And I think a lot of people rolled their eyes thinking, oh, it'll be Tampa or maybe Toronto. But I guess some hot takes going into the year that have kind of come to fruition in the early going. I told folks that the Red Sox were much improved. And I hate the Red Sox, but one thing that I always give credit for is I think Alex Cora is one of the better managers in all of MLB. And one of the last managers that doesn't really run things purely off of an analytical value. Um, and to be fair, I think your man, Kevin Cash, different kind of manager, but I believe Kevin Cash is on that same level in his own way. Um, but no, I think the Rays are going to hang around most of the year. I really do mean that. And I said it on my most recent show. I think it's a lot of adjusting. When you go into a new stadium and you kind of lose that home field advantage that the Trop provided for so many years, I think on certain levels it does make a difference. But I'm still pretty confident that Kevin Cash could get the most out of his guys. And they're a younger team, too. And I always think that helps in the dog days of summer. But yes, sir, on a lot of metrics, I'm with you on what you're saying with my team. They do strike out an awful lot. Interesting stat about the Yankees. They're the first team in the history of Major League Baseball to open games with three or more consecutive home runs in the same season. That's insane. Yeah, that's valuable. That's a good statement there. I couldn't agree more on that. But I will say this, Jordan. How you guys perform on the road will be a big telltale if you guys are going to be able to hang around. But yes, playing in a minor league stadium, the one cool thing I think for your team is that you're going to draw more crowds per seat because you and I have been to our fair share of games for the Yankees and Rays, and we enjoy it because you're not going to sweat your ass because it's indoors, controlled climate, and you could kind of sit anywhere because you have plenty of space. But I think the atmosphere surrounding Steinbrenner Stadium, because it's such a novelty this year, and more fans, I think is actually a positive for the Rays. So there's a couple of ways to look at it, but yes, indeed, I do agree with that. Because when you have less seats in the house, you're more prone to sell it out. But yeah, the Trop definitely a special place. I must admit that after the most recent hurricanes, I was very sad to see that, kind of turning a page because although the Trop, as many people would make fun of it, is an eyesore, um, still a special place in my opinion. You know, I do agree with that. Gonna bring in my man Dorney here for a second. The Brunson burner. Yeah, dude. The most clutch player in the NBA for a reason this past year. Um, and whenever he comes off of a lackluster performance, he never comes up short a second time. So I am very pleased with Jalen's efforts. I just pray that we have enough to at least give the Celtics an honest punch. But the Celtics are such a great team, and just can't deny that. Yeah, for sure, Jordan. I would have to say that one of the more comical ones was when you looked at me all crazy and was like, "Yo, Guardy's going yard," and I just looked at you like, "Absolutely not." This guy's like, oh, for the last 17 or 18 at bats and short as shit. He sent one over. And a little funny thing about Jordan and I, whenever we would go to the Rays and Yankees, whoever the driver was, it was almost like set in stone that their team was going to lose. So I always thought that was kind of comical with that. Oh, word. I'll see you then. I'll see you later today, bro. See you in a couple hours, Jordan. Jordan Patrick, former namesake of the show. Always good to have him in. And we're going to definitely get him on for a future baseball show. But yeah, in closing, I'm going to say this. I am just really excited about what my New York Giants have done on the defensive side of the ball. I think the way that they've built this defense right now, it's going to be a menace. And if the secondary can just play within themselves, I think the defense has the potential to be a top 10 unit. I like how the Giants super recently, post draft, bring in some competition for John Michael Schmitz at the center position. Center from Ole Miss. You also get that familiarity with future quarterback Jackson Dart. And in addition to that, you bring in Dart's number two man from Ole Miss, Antoine Wells. He was opposite of Trey Harris in college. I think these are moves that you're seeing more and more in the NFL where you're pushing familiarity amongst this. So, yeah, like what the G-Men are doing. Looking forward to the schedule release. And also very curious to see how all this shakes out with Shador Sanders in Cleveland. You know, no guarantees on what's going to happen. But I did read something interesting just the other day that on the Giants draft board, they had Dart ahead of Sanders, obviously. But if Dart would have been taken prior to the Giants doing what they did, which was trade back into round one, according to the Giants, they were actually going to make the move to pick up Shador, or maybe just sit at 34 and he would have been there. So it is interesting to see if there is legitimate validity if that was really going to happen. Of course, it doesn't matter much now because Shador's in a new place. And I'm going to say this now. I've said it before. I don't think Shador's going to last in Cleveland. I think one way or the other, he's going to find a way to get traded out of Cleveland and go to a more desirable destination. And, you got to be honest about things. If you got to look at it like this. If Shador Sanders was not ahead of Dylan Gabriel on their draft board, that too speaks volumes about what's going to go down. But it's an open competition as far as I'm concerned, and you have a veteran who's going to do his best to orchestrate just teaching the position and maybe trying to revitalize his stuff because Joe Flacco's last good season was in Cleveland. Last year, he didn't have that magic in Indy. But definitely a lot of storylines galore going into the new football season. You take a guy like a Daniel Jones, the embattled former New York Giant quarterback. I think he has a golden opportunity to take over in Indy, given the struggles of Anthony Richardson to stay on the field. So that's going to be something to pay attention to. And then, of course, you have the Aaron Rodgers saga. Pittsburgh neglected to take a quarterback in this draft. You would have to think that it's because they are confident enough that Aaron Rodgers will ultimately put on the black and gold. It's the only explanation. But definitely, these are storylines to keep an eye on. I think it's going to be interesting in the NFC East as well as the AFC East. In the AFC East, you have Aaron Glenn, former Jet, first time head coach. I think that he's going to do wonders for that organization. I really think he's going to get them back on track. I think it's Buffalo's division to lose without question. Um, but I think the interesting team in that division is actually going to be the New England Patriots. You know, I like the way they drafted. I really like the way the Patriots drafted, and I also think it's interesting that they bring in a veteran like Stephon Diggs, bringing him back to that division. And I think Drake May is ascending into one of the better young quarterbacks in the NFL. So it's all going to be worth keeping an eye on. And I'm going to say this now. I think the New England Patriots are going to be one of those teams that could hang around and potentially get a wild card. And I also think that the Los Angeles Chargers, after some of their moves, are going to be closing the gap on the AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs. I really love the first couple of picks that the Chargers, the moves that they made. Omari and Hampton out of North Carolina. I thought he was actually going to go to Denver. I had him mocked going to Denver. He ultimately goes to division rival Los Angeles Chargers. And they follow that up with Jackson Dart's favorite target, Trey Harris, because, the Chargers were desperate for another receiver over the last couple of years. Mike Williams couldn't stay healthy. Keenan Allen kind of playing his way out of the league. I like what the Chicago Bears did. I think their tight end room is going to potentially be the best that any team has had since the late Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski that New England had from 2010 to the early part of that decade, before Hernandez obviously had his off the field issues. But definitely going to be something to keep an eye on. Going to be looking forward to bringing you more basketball content as the NBA playoffs are moving into the second round soon. We're still waiting on seeing how these last two series in the West shake up. I am happy that the Knicks advance. Not happy that we got to play the Celtics, but like anything else, you gotta beat the best to be the best, and the Celtics are the best until somebody proves that wrong. Until next time, I am Richie. Enjoy your Friday.